Hey everybody, welcome back to RC with Adam. My name is Adam, and recently I was on the Caleb vs. Self podcast with Caleb Dunham, and what he does is he interviews people who are passionate in their field of expertise, and I happen to be one of those people that he contacted, and he said, hey, you want to do a podcast? And I said, I think so. So we had a great time. We sat down and talked about some RC stuff. We talked about all kinds of stuff, and maybe you'll learn a little bit more about me that I haven't brought up in other videos. Also, later, after the official podcast, we kept rolling a little bit longer, and I asked him a few questions to get his perspective on drones and the RC hobby as someone who is not really familiar with that sort of thing. So if you enjoy podcasts, I think you'll enjoy this one, and be sure to check out Caleb vs. Self if you want to hear some other interesting conversations with other interesting people. Now let's get started.
So thank you again for hopping on, Adam. I know it's a bit of a shot in the dark for me, just hitting you up on Instagram, being like, hey man, you want to talk? But I appreciate you hopping on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Caleb. I'm glad to be here. I mean, once I figured out that you weren't a creep, I was pretty, excited.
Well, just hold on. You might find out that.
Okay.
So your channel is mostly focused in the makerspace, more on drones and drone tech. What and how the hell did you go from going to school for what was it called again? Oh man, now I'm screwing this up.
Well, I went to school for a lot of things.
Aircraft maintenance.
That's right. That's right.
That's what you have on your site.
Yeah. You did your homework. Very good.
So how do you go from that to making drones?
Yeah, that's a great question. I ask myself that every day. I'll let you know when I have the answer. But yeah, so I mean that process, let me give you the super short version first. Otherwise I'll go off on a tangent. But basically got into aviation at some point in the past, can't remember when exactly, but did some flying lessons, and then I was like, I love aviation. This is super cool, but I didn't want to go the pilot route into a career in aviation. And everybody was like, oh, become a mechanic, you make a lot of money. So I was like, well, sure, okay. I mean, I've got nothing else to do right now. So after I think I went to 2 years of community college, and then I went to another community college to get my to ultimately get my A&P, which is airframe and power plant license, so that I could become a licensed aircraft mechanic and have the blessing of the FAA to work on aircraft. So basically I did that, and what I realized was, so I did that. I went through the program, and I, moved back home, moved back to Charlotte area, and I started working. Actually, when I was in school, I was doing sort of working as a mechanic or sort of helper on small aircraft, general aviation aircraft, and some jets too and stuff. But I wasn't in charge or anything. So anyway, I came back here, and I was looking around at the space, and I did end up working at a small airport on some working on GA aircraft as well. So none of the big airliner type of stuff. But basically what I realized is I kind of hated it, which is kind of weird because, I got into it because I like fixing things. I like mechanical stuff. I like aviation. So why wouldn't I love this? Why wouldn't this be the best job ever? And it's a great job, but just for me, what I realized was that I'm a maker and a creator, and not a repairer, not
a maintainer.
A maintainer. Yes, very good. That's the word I was looking for. I'm a creator and not a maintainer. And so the whole thing with aviation, manned aviation, is there are certain standards that you have to follow, and the manufacturer, basically, they make the aircraft a certain way, and your job is to basically just put it back to exactly how it was. Even if even if the design is outdated and, and it's like not a good design, like you could fix it, you could make it better, but it's like, no. If you do that, like you could like lose your license, or, I mean, if you do a bad job, that's the other thing, is if you do a bad job, you could potentially like cause a accident or something like that. So there is like that. So you kind of you have the pressure of, don't screw up, because like people's lives are kind of at stake, and then don't screw up because your job is at stake. And
right.
So it's a very basically it's a very like restrictive environment. And so I realized, what I love is like building things and fixing things, but making them actually better. Which you can't really do that if you want to do, aircraft maintenance in the traditional sense.
Right. So from there then, right, at what point does Adam pick up a quadcopter and start messing with drones in that aspect?
Oh, right. So, so that kind of started actually back in, I want to say it was 2014, when I was working at a local airport. I was just like the line guy, that goes out and fuels the planes and stuff. And a buddy of mine, who's actually now an airline captain, he was working with me, and he was into RC planes, and he told me about Flight Test. And he's like, yeah, there's this YouTube channel called Flight Test, and they make RC planes, and it's like, it's like a show. And I was like, a show for RC airplanes? What? Come on, what do they think of next? That's silly. But I still think like it's so cool. Like, or at the at the time I was like still very interested in RC stuff. So I went out with him a few times and flew RC airplanes and stuff. So he's the one that got me turned on to it, basically. His name is Caleb also, actually.
Hey, shout out to Caleb.
Shout out to Caleb. And so that kind of sparked it. And then, I kind of carried that with me. And then right before I left to go to school for my A&P license, I got like this tiny little micro quadcopter, like just like a little toy, basically. Mm-hmm. But I was just like, I loved like flying this thing, like just learning how to hover it and fly it around. And it seems dumb, right? Because it's just like a stupid little toy, but it was super enjoyable. And then all through the 2 years that I was at school, I was like flying that thing, and I was the weirdo that would, during breaks between classes, I would go out like in the back lot, and I'd throw around these, the little like balsa wood airplanes.
Yes.
Yeah. And so we'd like make modifications to those and like change the weight and, to change the center of gravity. And, I would have more fun just flying those around, than, anything else like on break. And so like, that was like really enjoyable. So basically
are those the ones with the rubber band that's in there that you like?
No, this was just like, this was just like a toss glider. Like
okay.
They're like the little ones are like super cheap, super lightweight. Actually they're kind of hard to find, but like they're just like a few pieces of balsa. And, so like, I just love that. And like, cause you get to experience so much of aviation just through that, like way more than you do if you're like in a classroom, like being told about aviation, because like once you understand some concepts, even like a little throw glider, you can start to experience and apply concepts, like lift and center of gravity and things like that. So basically all throughout school, I was wanting to get into RC stuff and drones. Drones weren't really a thing at the time, and they were still kind of in their infancy, at least like the FPV racing drones that we have now. Mm-hmm. And this was like 2015-ish. So in 2016, once I graduated from school, I moved back to the Charlotte area, then I finally had like time and a little bit of money and space to actually fly, to get into RC aircraft. So I just got this RC kit made by Flight Test. It's called the Tiny Trainer. And so I got that whole. It's made out of foam board, so like those sheets of foam board that you find at the dollar store.
Yep.
It's made out of that type of stuff, and it has a little electric motor, little battery, and so like I finally got into it, and it was just I just had a blast. Like it was just like such a cool experience to finally get into RC. And we're just talking like little cheap foam, super simple airplane, like nothing special. But it was special to me. And so that's kind of, it kind of just went out from there, kind of spiraled out from there. And I was like, this is awesome. I need to do this more forever.
Just to put it lightly, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Well, it's you can see very clearly your passion for it specifically, but it sounds like, and from a lot of the videos that I've watched and the things that I've read, it sounds like a lot of that really comes from this disconnect between training to maintain these aircraft and actually learning the fundamental principles of flying. And again, I am not an expert in any way, shape, or form, but I hear you talk about things like pitch and the yaw and the roll and all these things, and it sounds like you had a way better time understanding how all that stuff works by using these little, right, whether it's the balsa wood plane or a tiny toy quadcopter, whatever it is that really where like that disconnect or that connection was made? Like I'm actually seeing these things in principle and now I get to play with it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, because the thing is, like I said, I'm much more of a creator. Much more, I'm like a lot of different things. I'm not even sure what exactly I would, classify as, because I'm sort of a designer and engineer, but then also kind of like an artist. And, I care about little details, but only when they matter to me. So it was like when I got into RC, I was actually able to, I had the freedom to experiment with all these different types of aviation concepts. And it's, it's safe to do it. It's cheap to do it. It's very accessible. So yeah, that disconnect between like, I mean, honestly, it seems like some of the most unhappy people are people that love aviation, but then like that's their job at the same time, which obviously, I mean, there's always that danger of when you try to, turn your passion into, making a living and all that stuff. But, I think that was definitely what drove this desire to get more into RC stuff. Cause I learned like the power of having the freedom to try out different designs, and it's okay if it crashes and you can fix it, and you don't really you don't have somebody else's standards that you have to live up to in order to make this thing fly. And basically you learn by failing a lot. And I think that's one of the best ways to learn, really, because you're going to remember it. Whereas if you're in class and they say, hey, you got to remember, you got to remember to torque this correctly. And you got to remember to do this, and this. And you're like, okay, sure. But really it's like, I got to remember to check off that I did that and do this paperwork saying that I did that. And I mean, obviously do a good job, but like the most important thing is like, checking the boxes, so to speak. Whereas if you have the freedom to try something and you don't do it right, and then your RC plane explodes, and you're like, oh, I remember, why that happened, and I'm not going to forget it. And so it's like you really get to put into practice everything that you learn.
Is that why you throw straw and sticks at carbon fiber props in plastic props?
Yes. Also for the views. Yeah. I mean, yeah, stuff like that. It's it seems ridiculous. It is ridiculous. That was a really stupid setup. I don't know what I was thinking.
I had
there.
fun watching it. If it makes you feel any better.
Good. I'm glad you did. I mean, yeah, I think it's worth watching. So anybody who's listening, go check it out.
Absolutely is. And even in that video, there was something to be learned. And you pointed out at the very end, and that was the way that each propeller actually broke. And the reason why, right? The carbon fiber, there's more fibers in there. So it took a chunk of the hub off as opposed to the plastic piece just straight up snapped off. So even though it was a little ridiculous and you probably knew that already, you still validated that by doing the experiment, even though, sure, it might have been a little bit for the views, but there's still value in doing certain things like that, even if you already know the outcome.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes, I mean, sometimes you do things that you think you know what's going to happen just to see if, what you actually think is going to happen actually happens. So, yeah, that was a good one. I see how you pulled that out of there. That was good.
Well, what I like about a lot of your videos is that you try your best, and you do a good job at it, in my opinion, but you try your best to explain the process that you're going through, your mental thought processes. Okay, if X plus Y equals Z, but this time it equaled W, how do we figure out why that occurred?
Yeah,
there's a lot of value in that.
Was that
no, it's all good.
Yeah.
It's just there's a lot of value in that, and that's if I steer that into something else. You said at one point, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but once you learn something, it's easy to forget how it was not to know it. And you go through that cycle when you first started. And there's a video of you in 2017 talking about how you go through anger and then despair and then confusion and then anger, and it's just such a pain. But your goal there, and the thing that you pointed out, is I want to help people by not forgetting how hard it was to get started. And you've done a very good job at that on your channel. And going into the future, is that really a lot more of the focus, is to make sure that people can not necessarily get around those obstacles, but at least get a little bit of help navigating the beginning of that process?
Well, thank you. Yeah, that is definitely a huge focus of my channel, and I hope it continues to be. It is, I will say, excuse me. I will say it is super easy to lose sight of that. I mean, actually, like you said, or like you said, I said about, it's super easy to forget what it was like to not know something once you know it. That's actually kind of what I'm going through right now, and really having to try hard to really remind myself of to be able to put myself in other people's shoes that are just now getting into the hobby. And the tricky thing about that is that, it's always changing. So the technology is always changing. So it's like, you have to always be learning. And there are some basics, but you kind of have to be continually learning and then continually remembering what it was like for people that just got into the hobby or just got started or just learning about something. So yeah, that is a big focus, and Lord willing, I will continue that and not get swept up in trying to make videos like everybody else's that are super short and choppy, and you leave out the important stuff that's boring, but yeah.
Yeah, I hope you keep pushing that direction, because I firmly believe that in order for a sport or a hobby or even a profession to grow, you need people who can take on that mentor type role. And I think that that's something that you're heading in that direction of, and I think you have a very clear focus as to doing that. That leads me to my next question, is that for 2021, you put out a video asking people what they would like to see from you as far as videos or content is concerned. My question to you is, has anyone responded with something that's something you never thought of? Oh, wow, that's a really good idea. I should do that.
Yes. Yeah. I got quite a few responses on that video, I think. And then, of course, comments all the time. I mean, more comments that I can keep up with. So if you left a comment and I haven't responded, sorry about that. I try. Yes, I can't actually think of any particular one at the moment. But there's certainly a lot. I would say there's definitely a big demand for the type of stuff that I started this channel for, which is budget stuff, beginner stuff, some new stuff, new technology, but honestly, I think most people don't come to my channel for the latest cutting edge stuff, and that's not really what I do. And that's kind of one of the things as I've grown and evolved, in with the RC with Adam channel, is that I've gotten a better sense of what I'm about. And so a big thing is that people are asking for, and then I hope to continue bringing people, is like budget stuff, beginner stuff, tutorials that are basically for dummies, that type of thing, and not so much super cutting edge, in-depth technical stuff. Honestly, I realize that's not really my strength anyway. I'm happy to leave that to other channels that do that, and they do it well, and that's their thing.
Sure. It's hard to keep that in mind, right? As you're competing in a content space, is to remind yourself of what you're good at and not to always just drop into what everyone else is doing just because, whether they might have a few more views or maybe they edit a little better. And it's hard to keep focus on what you're good at and what your focus is. How do you maintain that focus on your specific craft?
That's a good question. Yeah, well, I mean, I think I don't even know if it's so much as maintaining the focus as it is focusing, because I'm still just stumbling around just like everybody else, I've grown a lot and I've learned a lot, and so much, especially over the past year, over 2020, and I'm getting continually getting a better idea of what kind of videos to make and what, what I mean? What I'm all about. I mean, just how, how people grow up in life and they learn more about themselves. I'm constantly, learning more about, my channel and kind of how to do that. So, yeah, I don't know if I have a really good answer specifically to how I would maintain the focus of the channel. 'Cause in a way it's it's kind of always changing, but I will say it is good to, I think probably just hearing people's comments helps a lot. Seeing what videos people respond to, and probably the opposite of that. I mean, what doesn't help is looking at everybody else's videos, because it's those people they're not me, and they're not my viewers and stuff and my audience. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm just gonna keep on trying to stay focused, or keep on focusing, and I'll let you know when I have a good answer for that too.
Fair enough. Going back to drones itself, do you still have the original, what is it, Hubsan X4 H107L? Is that what it is?
Man, you really do your homework. Yeah, it's up on the wall behind me somewhere up on the wall. I don't know if
do you have your first scratch built plane, the Thin Man?
No, I don't.
Is it destroyed?
I don't know what I was thinking back then, man. I was just thinking I guess I was well, that one's done. We'll just destroy that one forever because I don't need that one anymore. But that's actually part of why I started making videos, was because I could sort of catalog the builds that I do. So I wouldn't necessarily have to keep it, which kind of makes sense, because eventually you can't keep every single thing. But no, I don't have that one.
I would have thought the Thin Man held a special place in your heart.
It does. It will always hold a special place in my heart. It will.
I liked that video. I liked watching you go through that process of building it and flying it, and it was just it was cool to see that excitement on your face. It was that, oh, I did it moment. I can do this. This is feasible.
Oh yeah, that's what it's all about, man. That is what it's all about. It's all about that building that, what I call confidence and competence. That's kind of my tagline, is helping you build confidence and competence in the RC hobby and beyond, because that's what it was for me. Is I just, that's really where most of my confidence, whatever confidence that I do have in the RC hobby and stuff, it came from realizing like, whoa, like I can fix this thing. Like I can build this thing. Like I was able to do that. And so if I can fix this thing or build this airplane, what else can I do? And so that's, I hope that comes across in the videos, because that's what I try to do is get people inspired. If I'm not like directly explaining something or helping them do something, is get people inspired and get people kind of that sense of like confidence to be able to take on challenges. And then when you take on that challenge, then you'll get more confident and you'll learn more, so you'll get more competent. And I really think that spreads out to pretty much all other aspects in life, like because it's at least a starting point, because you might think, oh, RC stuff, that's just toys, and like what does that have to do with your job at wherever you work or something? Well, you're building your confidence in yourself and your personal abilities and your skills and stuff. So I think that is that's why I do what I do. It really, when it comes down to it, is RC stuff is really fun. Flying stuff is fun. I love aviation, love crashing things. But the reason why I do this is to actually help people, hopefully in a way that will benefit them beyond the actual hobby or beyond the actual aircraft that they're working on. So there's definitely a lot of power in the RC world.
Yeah, I think in your specific space, being able to take a craft, crash it or upgrade it and figure out went right or wrong. Yeah, you're right. It gives people that confidence outside of that to say, hey, I can troubleshoot something, and that can apply more than just motors and propellers. It can go beyond into my job or my relationship, or right, being able to have those type of conversations, not just with yourself, but potentially with other people, that's extremely powerful. And just as a personal thing, I would love to hear a little bit more about that. Going through this whole process, where have you seen, outside of being more confident and competent in the RC space, where else have you seen that impact your life?
Well, I would say, well, it's hard to pinpoint like where exactly, but I would say
Sure.
Generally much more confident. And then also with making the videos, so yeah, in terms of that process for me, making videos is like there's so much as a person that let me back up here. So yes, I would say it affects, it's hard to pinpoint where exactly the confidence that I get from the RC stuff and technical skill abilities impacts the rest of my life. But like in terms of the actual like the practical skills part, I mean, helps a ton, like with just, fixing anything, fixing electronics. Before I got into RC stuff, I was like, oh, electronics are magic and I don't understand them. and it turns out that's actually still true. They are magic and I don't understand them, but I'm not afraid of working on them.
Right.
And that's a big thing, is like, the fear. I would say you're a lot less afraid of certain things, trying new things, testing something out. Because if you know how to fix something, then you're not afraid to break it.
Mm.
Or at least you'll know what to do when you break it anyway, which happens a lot. In fact, that just happened to me the other day.
No.
And so I would say definitely like in the technical skills and abilities, like really, I say this, and it's kind of it's not an exaggeration per se, but take it for what it's worth. But I really think that I learned more like in the first 6 months to a year of getting into RC stuff than I did during the 2-year class for aviation maintenance. And obviously, like, you're not going to learn about manned aviation specific stuff, like just working on RC stuff. But in terms of cementing the knowledge that I had and actually like making it like a visceral understanding of why, how planes work and why things work the way that they do. And then also the confidence to work on things really came from the RC world and not so much from the aviation world. Because I'll be honest with you, like I tend to like I wouldn't like I said, there's kind of that there's kind of that fear in for me. I'll just speak for myself in aviation maintenance, where it's like if I screw up, like that could be like a huge problem. I probably won't screw up, but like if I did, then that could be a big problem. I could get in trouble, lose my license, or someone could get hurt. So I think that shoot, where was I going with that?
Well, it sounds like if I could piggyback off of that.
Yes, please do.
In that maintenance space, it's so restricted and so process driven and oriented that you don't have any of those freedoms to be able to make those mistakes and then learn from said mistakes.
Right. Yes. Yeah. That's And I've probably already said that, and I'll probably say it again and again because that was the big takeaway, for me. And again, it's like aviation maintenance is great, and if you love doing that, that's awesome. It's just not for me, is what I discovered. And that takes like time to discover that. So if you're like, gee, I'm like all unhappy, like, for a few years, then it's like maybe what you're doing is not like what you actually need to be, doing. And so, so definitely overcoming a lot of fears is where that has helped me, and it's that, right. So that's where I got a lot of the confidence. So I didn't get a lot of the confidence from like working on, manned aviation.
Right.
Cause I was just like so self-conscious all the time, to be honest with you. Like,
well, again, to your point, if you do something wrong, holy moly, is it wrong?
Yeah.
So the pressure is so high.
And the other thing is, I mean, even if we're not talking like legally or safety wise, like, you're on, even just manned aviation, small aircraft, general aviation aircraft. I mean, you're looking at least $100,000 for, almost any airplane. A Cirrus, which is a very popular, newly manufactured aircraft. It's like a 4-seater general aviation aircraft, and those are like at least. I mean, I think they start at $250. I want to say. And they can, they'll easily go up, from there. So basically the point is there's kind of high stakes. Like if you scratch something, like, darn it, like people are not going to be happy. Like even if you just do something like that. So, and I don't want to discourage anybody who wants to get into aviation maintenance or something, but I'm just saying that's one of the reasons why it was not for me. And in the RC world, I had a lot more freedom, and so I was able to really, build, more confidence around things, and so, working around expensive things, and so that's, excuse me, that's, pardon me, that's really helped me a lot for sure, and actually, let's see what else. Also, the other great thing about RC stuff is. RC planes, RC quadcopters, or drones as people commonly call them, is you get a lot of experience with like everything. So a lot of times in aviation maintenance, manned aviation maintenance, it's like you might be, especially the larger the aircraft, the more specified you get. So you might be like the avionics guy, and you just do like electrical stuff. Or you might be, the guy that just does sheet metal stuff or composite stuff. But when you have a small aircraft, especially if you've built it yourself, then you get to do everything, and you get that experience. So like when you build a plane, you build the fuselage, and or RC plane, you build the fuselage, you put the motor together, and if there's a problem with the electronics, you do the troubleshooting, and you learn how electronics work, and then you learn how aerodynamics work and weight and balance and all this stuff. So, so that's been a huge, huge help for me. And so, because the other thing, I don't know if many of my viewers know this, but I'm actually in the process. And it's a long process, but I'm in the process right now of building a plane with my dad. So we're actually building it like a manned aviation 2-seater airplane.
Oh, okay.
In his garage. And so I'm kind of like the person heading that up and like overseeing that as the mechanic, and it's a huge undertaking. Like it's way
imagine,
way bigger than I thought. But the thing is, like, I really think that I would not even have the confidence to even start it or to consider starting it if I hadn't learned so much from the RC world, and especially in terms of having kind of being a jack of all trades a little bit in terms of like electronics and sheet metal and all kinds of different stuff.
That's, first of all, ridiculous that you're building an airplane with your dad.
It is, yeah. It's very
super
ridiculous.
Cool all at the same time. So I hope that ends up on the channel at some point somewhere.
Well, actually, I will tell you, and it's not a secret. It's not a secret, but I have another
not
channel.
Anymore.
Well, did you in your homework, did you see that I have another channel about building that airplane? It's very out of date. It's very out of date. It's not very good. But if you want to see some stuff about like me building a manned aviation or an aircraft, you can check it out. It's called Jeff and Adam Build a Zenith. It's all one word.
Is a Zenith? Is that the name of the plane?
That's right. So we're building a kit airplane, and it's classified as experimental, but it's a kit airplane, and it's made by Zenith. Zenith Aircraft is the manufacturer, and our model is a 750 Cruiser model. It's a little 2-seater high wing airplane, and it's interesting. We're about. It's so hard to say how far along we are, and people always ask us like, "Oh, when is it going to be done?" And I'm like, "I'll let you know when it's done." Like, because it's such a huge project, and then like all the setbacks, and then the builder burnout, and all kinds of stuff. And it sounds like I'm complaining. I kind of am. It's. I realize it's an awesome. I'm super happy to have the opportunity to actually build an airplane. It's just a huge project.
Yeah,
so.
Well, I got to tell you, you got me. I did not find this.
Haha!
Yeah. I'm going to take the L on that one. But that's really cool. I'm looking at it right now. You've got the sliding seats and the cooler mount and the ignition. I can tell you, though, I don't think you're complaining. I hope that you don't feel like you come off as complaining. But I think everybody also knows that when you're in the midst of a big project, there's always going to be a burnout. There's always going to be like, oh, geez, like we still have so much left to do. I don't think that takes away from like your motivation, but I think most people are like, yeah, we get it. You're building an airplane.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, I think what it is if, whenever you're in a certain space and you're familiar with like the other people in that space, that's what you compare yourself to. So, I'll see these videos of, even just other people building like the exact same airplane, and they're like, they might be so much farther ahead, or they just seem like they have it all together, or they've got, the paint on, or they've like all, you know what I mean? Like, and you just start doing that like comparison kind of thing. And yeah, so yeah, sometimes I do, but I appreciate, the understanding.
I think everyone does. And I think the thing about the internet, Adam, is that there's always going to be somebody better than you.
Yeah, that's right.
So you can't compare yourself to anybody else.
That's
like
right.
You said earlier, right?
Yeah.
You are the only you, and you can only compare yourself to the guy that you were yesterday. And
that's right. I tell myself that every day. I mean, you have to, especially if you're producing content. You have to.
Yep. Absolutely. So let me back up just a little bit, because one of my favorite troubleshooting moments that you had was a live flight. You backpacked up into the Adirondack Mountains. I forget exactly where.
Yeah. Oh, is that Appalachian Mountains?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm thinking of where I'm in New York.
Okay.
So
yeah,
so it's that part of the the Appalachian Mountains. But either way, you were climbing up there, you get on top of a rock outcropping, and you start flying your drone around just to figure out that everything looks the same.
Yeah. It's
And
funny
you
how that happens.
used your video transmitter to figure out where you were to get your drone back. And I thought that was the coolest, like, in the moment, you have a problem, you did essentially a very quick troubleshooting, and you got your drone back. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure you would have lost that thing.
Yeah, I think so. I think I probably would have lost it forever.
But there was more than just that, right? You get up there, you open your bag, and the battery fell out of your... I'm going to call it a controller. I know it's not called a controller.
No, you can call it a controller. It's
Okay.
People call it different things. Controller's fine.
Okay. But the battery gets disconnected, and you just bust out the soldering iron, and you're right back at work getting the battery reattached to it. You get everything all squared away. That whole trip, although you complained about hiking, which is a bone I have to pick with you, you had a successful trip because of all the knowledge that you've accumulated throughout that time. To me, that video is like a signifier of how far you came from where you started. For you, what did you do? I guess, do you ever look back and compare, like, where you were to where you're at? Especially in that type of context, like actively troubleshooting something and solving problems mid-flight.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for acknowledging that or bringing that up. That was a pretty scary situation for me. It was totally safe and stuff, but it was just like, yeah. Do I ever compare myself to like how far I've come? Is that
well, like, do you ever, when you look back at some of your videos and then you look at like that video, for example, do you ever look at like, you know, there was a cycle where I was just mad and in despair and confused and I couldn't figure out how to get things done to, hey, look, I actively troubleshooted several things on a trip that I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise.
Yeah, you know, yes, I do, and I try to remind myself of that. You know what I mean? Because like it's, you know, a lot of times, you know, your biggest critic is yourself. So I do have to remind myself of like, wow, like even just in the past year of all the things that I've learned, related to RC and this channel and all that stuff. So yeah, I definitely, I do look back and I go, wow, like look at that crazy guy. But you know, the funny thing is though, is that I don't really feel very different because the stakes just get higher and there's always more stuff to learn. So like, it's almost like you kind of never feel like you know what you're doing, and maybe that's how you're supposed to feel, because if you thought that you knew what you were doing, then that probably just means that you have no idea what you're doing. Right. You know what I mean? So yeah, I do look back at that and I'm like, wow, that's pretty crazy. But that trip was that was another good example of a trip where, or just a thing that you do that you could look at that and easily be like, oh yeah, that was a failure. Like that was a failed trip because it didn't go the way that I thought. But I learned a lot. You know, I learned a lot from it. Like I just said, learning from your failures is like one of the best ways to learn. And you know, that was a perfect example of that. But you said you have a bone to pick about hiking.
Yeah, what's wrong with hiking, dude?
Have you hiked? Are you a hiker?
Not like on a regular basis, but it's gorgeous out. I mean, I've done a couple of backpacking trips with my brothers, and we went through some, you know, terrible like backwoods bushwhacking situations. But when you come out of that, I think that you look back in the moment, right? When you're making that video, you're like, this is awful. I'm hot. You know, maybe you're running low on water. You finally get back to the car or the truck and you turn the AC on and you're just miserable, right? But when you look back on that experience, what do you think about that whole experience? Like, the whole thing in a nutshell, the hike, everything that happened, the battery breaking. Thankfully, you got your drone back, walking all the way back. When you were sitting in your car, you're probably like, that was miserable. I barely got out with my drone. I barely got out of this whole situation. Now looking back on it, I bet you probably look at it very fondly.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I think is like, Man, I should have just flown up there from the parking lot. Like
I mean,
that's what I realized. I was like,
you do have a drone.
I am an idiot. Why am I hiking up a mountain just to fly around the mountain when
I mean, to be fair though, you got some gorgeous shots.
Oh yeah, they did turn out pretty good. And I mean, even though like I still, I mean, like, yeah, that's even that. Like I got these, pretty good shots and stuff. And
Pretty good?
But
Dude.
No, I mean, yeah, they're good. Like, but they're not like exactly what I would, you know what I mean? Like I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. Okay. I'll let you know
tell.
a little bit. Yeah. It's something that I have to, struggle with like constantly. And so, but I mean, even that is kind of an example of like looking back on it now, I'm like, oh, now I see like how the things I could have done differently and not necessarily, not in like a, guilty kind of way, but like, I realized like, oh, okay, like next time, now that I've done that, next time I'll know to do this, and this, like have better hiking shoes and not go hiking. But
have a different backpack. I mean, you were doing that on the way back. You identified like, okay, like carrying all the stuff in my hiking backpack probably wasn't the best idea.
Yeah, that's and I mean, I realize like that is just like anything else. You have to do something like a lot to get good at it. Like that's and that's another thing that I try to remind myself is like anything that you're doing, like first of all, you're gonna suck for like the first 10 times that you do it. So just plan on that, and then you got to do it like a lot of times if you want to get good at that. And so, backpacking or drone packing, as I call it, is also one of those things. But man, I'll tell you what though. I mean, I don't know what it's like in New York. I've never hiked in the Adirondack Mountains. But have you hiked down here?
I haven't.
Because it's I'm just going to tell you from my perspective, it's terrible most of the time. It's like a jungle, man. It's like a jungle.
Yeah.
It's humid. It's hot. There's bugs everywhere. There's brush all over the place. It's kind of like being, to me, and this is why I got this is why I became fascinated with aviation in the first place, because the terrain is relatively flat and there are trees everywhere. Like there's really no point that's like above tree line.
Right.
So, I mean, there are places that don't have trees, but it's not like out west where it's like, oh, you're just above the tree line now and you can see like everywhere. You get this feeling of being like trapped in a jungle, and you just want to see the sky, and you want to see things around you, but you can't, because like you look around and everywhere you look, you can see like 20 feet. And so that's kind of that's why I don't super enjoy hiking. But I agree though, hiking is important because it's like working out. Like it's intentional discomfort, and that is important. Like that is a good healthy thing to do. And then also, especially if you can, if you have cool people to go hiking with. I don't really have any cool people to go hiking with, or if you have people that you can trick into going hiking with you, because you tell them that it's going to be great, and you're going to roast marshmallows and
right.
and see little baby fawns running around, and you don't see any of that, and it's raining the whole time.
No.
And then they hate you. So yeah, that's most of my experience.
The one thing I will tell you though is that if you trick them into doing that hike, Adam, in a year or two, right, everyone will fondly look back at how horrible an experience it was, and it's a bonding moment for a lot of people. You will get one good story and bonding moment out of it, and then they will never go hiking with you again. They might.
Maybe. That not in my experience, but
okay,
yeah.
Fair enough. So
but
let me keep driving.
Hiking is great though. I mean, I all joking aside, I wish I could I wish I liked hiking more, or had better places that I liked to hike more.
Well, that might be part of the issue, right?
Yeah.
If you go out west, hiking is certainly much different. Like you said, right? There's curated trails, and there are it's not that
Oh,
there's no woods or
yeah.
trees, but
You
there's a
get
lot
to
more clearings, it feels
you
like.
get to choose. Like you get to
Yeah.
choose. Like, do I want to be in the brush or do I want to, be in this amazing field with this amazing mountain with this amazing sky. I friggin' love the Western geography. That's
Yes.
I want to move out there, but I
Me
haven't
and you
yet.
both.
So, well,
Me
let's
and you
go,
both.
man. Cause I mean, yeah, really, that's I don't know when, but sometime, probably, hopefully before I die, I would like to, move out there because there's just something about it, man. Something about the openness and the big sky and the trees and the space. It's the
It
space. I love
feels
the space.
freeing.
Oh yeah,
Like you
because
can
yeah,
just relax.
yeah, like
Just
and I mean, especially if everything that Instagram is telling me is true,
which it's not, but
No, it's not. It's not because I have been out there. I mean, I did go out west on a on this road trip, which was another trip that was basically I look back and it was like you can either look back on fondly or you can look back on it and be like, oh yeah, that was a complete failure. What a terrible time. What a waste of everything. But at the same time, it's like, but I can say that I did it. So there is that,
Was
and it's.
I don't think it was, but was that part of the Flight Fest 2018, or is that a different trip for you?
What was it? Was that I think it was 17. I want to
Okay.
say it was 17, but I did go to Flight Fest. I did go to Flight Fest, and that was my first stop, and then I drove to the rest of the country. And
Gotcha.
honestly, the biggest thing my biggest regret about that whole trip was just that I was like driving most of the time. I was just like driving. So it was like I got to
Right.
see a lot of stuff, but not really like experience a lot of stuff. But anyway,
There's definitely a difference driving through a
Mhm.
state or a town as opposed to spending a day or two in a given
Yeah.
area, really
Yeah.
getting a feel for everything.
For sure.
So let me drive this back over to the drone stuff a little more, because now into 2021 and even in 2020, a lot of the focus for you, it feels like, and I could be wrong, has moved into flight simulators and 3D printing quite a bit. For flight simulators, I know you did a video comparing 3 of them. I know you talk about the advantage of it, of not crashing so much or it costing so much to practice.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like for you that's made a huge difference in your flight abilities doing those simulators?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I kind of, I of course, I'm always improving my skills, and if I get rusty, it takes me a while to get back to where my skills, the level that my flying skills were at. But definitely having a simulator helps like a ton, like a huge bonus. I mean, really, like nowadays, like anybody who's listening, if you want to get into FPV racing drones, get a simulator. That's like the first thing. And then I guess get a transmitter, the controller that you can connect to the computer, so that you can practice. Like that's it. Like it's kind of, it would be kind of crazy to not use a simulator, which is what I did. And a lot of people did, because back in, I don't know, back in 2016, 17, there weren't as many flight simulators, or at least I just didn't really know about them. So I kind of, I got on the simulator like kind of after I had already like learned to fly and stuff. But yeah, huge.
Well, it
huge
looked like even in
difference.
the flight simulators now, you can adjust. I'm gonna butcher this, but the settings within the controller as well, you can mirror them specifically to your controller.
Yeah, I mean you can, and of course it kind of depends on like how good your computer is, because the faster your computer and stuff, the better, the more realistic it is. But yeah,
Naturally.
I mean you can absolutely, and there's people made videos like showing this. You can absolutely get a few hours of simulator training, and then go outside and start flying almost just like the simulator. Like it's super amazing. Like if it's kind of, well, like I said, it'd be crazy to not use a simulator, really. Even like a basic cheap simulator, just getting that excuse me, just getting that kind of the hand-eye coordination and like the muscle memory, huge.
Yeah, I mean, it also looks cool. Like it's like
Yeah,
I know
it's fun.
you
Yeah, it's
liked
super fun.
the drone racing league simulator, and I
That's
felt
right.
like the one thing that I liked about that, just watching that specific video, is that
Hmm.
it almost gamifies it.
Oh yeah,
So I
totally.
feel like it's a good entry point as well for younger people who
Oh yeah.
might not have a drone. So spending $10 on a drone simulator, helps make that entry point for somebody who might want to one day get a quadcopter and start, doing all that stuff.
Yeah, it's so accessible, and it's so helpful, incredibly helpful. And actually you can get I can't remember which ones exactly. I want to say it was I think DRL is on, no, Liftoff is on Xbox, I think. But basically you can get, the you can do the drone simulators, like FPV drone simulators on Xbox, PlayStation, I don't know about Switch or something, but yeah, even game systems as well. And it is like, you could just fly it as a game. You could just do it as a game, and then if you want to do the real thing, you could transfer pretty much all that knowledge right over to it and just like start flying. It'd be crazy.
Same thing with 3D printing. It seems to be like it makes it a lot easier. It looks like for you, as I'm going to call you this, although I don't know if you consider yourself this per se, but
Okay.
in engineer, you're going into. Granted, I think the first program you used was more of a basic kind of CAD program, but you built mounts for a motor because you looked at your drone and you're like, I don't want to drill any more holes into this because it might impact the way that the drone flies. And you went out and you created these mounts and you 3D printed them, and bam, like you're creating all these different upgrades. How impactful has the 3D printing space been to your time in the RC drone space?
Yeah, that's huge. I would say I'm like a little engineer, I guess.
Sure.
I'm like a casual engineer, perhaps, I guess.
I feel like that's a term that could be like realistic today.
Well, I just made it up, so that's what it is. I'm a casual engineer, which honestly sounds kind of dangerous, but
which is why you don't do that on manned aircraft.
Well, I mean,
RCs.
that's how it goes. But we live in an age of new and exciting things all the time, so there's always that little bit of danger there. But yeah, it's been a huge help. 3D printing, that was another thing very similar to how I got into the RC stuff. I saw other people doing it. I watched videos and really learned a lot. I was just watching. I was just like almost everything I could, like about 3D printing, all these different videos about how to design using modeling software. So I think the one that you mentioned was Tinkercad. It's called Tinkercad, which is a modeling software that it's free, and it's made for children, or it's made to be so that children can easily use it. So it's a very intuitive platform. And other ones like Fusion 360, which is a bit more complicated but like super capable. And so so that's a huge thing, is like we were talking about with the confidence and stuff. Like once I have this confidence in building drones and that stuff, it's very easy to go, oh, like I could probably figure out this 3D printing thing as well, like and use that. And there's a huge crossover as well. A lot of crossover between the 3D printing space and the drone space. Probably the most popular thing is GoPro mounts for FPV flying. So you print with like a flexible material called TPU. It's kind of like rubbery silicone kind of. And so you can, design your mount for your GoPro that fits your drone frame, and then print out the mount, and then boom, you put your GoPro in there, and then you've got, it takes out the jello in the video feed and all that stuff. So yeah, being able to make accessories and make things that I've come up with is like, that's what's super cool. Cause like how before I was saying, I'm a creator. This is a huge 3D printing is a huge benefit for creators. Like just the idea that you can just take something that's in your mind and then like, learn how to use these programs on the computer relatively quickly and then print, like create this plastic thing that is actually like functional and it's how you designed it, like, and all in the same day in your house. It's amazing.
Well, it also limits the dependence that you used to have on manufacturers to create parts that you need. You get to now just be like, nope, I don't need that. I know exactly what customizable feature I want, and I can put it together and have it printed. And like you said, in a day or two, done. There it is.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then also customizing items, like, because you don't have to design something like from scratch every time. You can go to websites and download models, 3D models, and print those. And or you can take something that somebody else made and then for your own purposes put it in a modeling program and then customize it for your drone or whatever. So yeah, it's like it's revolutionary, as they would say. But I mean, I guess everybody knows that. But I'm just reiterating, and especially in the drone space, it's very it's very fast paced, and so being able to do 3D printing is very helpful.
Nice. Well, it's exciting. It's there's a lot going on, I feel like. I hope that for you, for your channel, you continue to grow and you continue to push those boundaries, and hopefully continue to get people to have more confidence and competence in their own abilities, whether it's in the RC drone space or wherever else they decide to take that. So I appreciate all your time, Adam. Thank you so much. And like I said, I look forward to seeing more of your stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Caleb. I have a question for you.
Please.
Actually, if I may, while I have you.
I don't think I'm interesting, but go for it.
And so, okay, is it okay if I put this on my channel or splice this in here somewhere? So I'm curious for you, as someone who is, you said you had a little bit of experience with like basic military drones, like surveillance, small surveillance drones in the military.
Yes. Yep.
So what do you think when you hear someone talk about like a drone? Like what comes to mind when you hear the word drone?
Surveillance. That's
surveillance.
I mean, at the end of the day, what is the purpose of having a drone in the air? Right? It's one of two things. You're either racing them or you're looking for something or you're looking at something. So for me, the first thought is surveillance. And then my second thought is ESPN2 in the drone racing league. Those guys, with their neon lights flying around warehouses and getting into nets at the end of the, those are the two things I think of when I think of drones.
Interesting. And so, and so what about, what do you think of the same things when you hear somebody say like RC or model aircraft?
No. When I think of model aircraft, I think of my dad, who would take, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, but they weren't just simple balsa wood planes, but they were the ones where you had to, put the whole thing together, and then you use that what was it called, like almost like this tissue paper with glue over the whole body of it. And there's the rubber band in it that's attached to the propeller, and you spin that around and then you let it go. That's what I think of when I think of like RC planes. It's very different in my brain as opposed to drones.
Gotcha. So that's interesting. And so, what do you think of about like FPV drones? Does that mean anything to you, FPV drones?
I mean, first person view. Again, I always think of surveillance. You're looking to capture something. In the drone space, I feel like it is photography. It's those super cool, Lord of the Rings over the mountain shots that everybody loves to see in the movies. I think of search and rescue. I think of using drones to go out into a beach and see somebody's having trouble, because one of the common things I think for lifeguards is that it's very hard to see somebody who is drowning because they are in fact under the water, right? It's hard to see them from the waves. They're beneath the water. But if you have any idea that, hey, somebody might need help, how quick and easy is it to shoot a drone straight up into the air 100 feet and then to scan said area and identify somebody who might be a little too far out or caught in an undertow. Like that's what I think of is eyes in the sky.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. And so have you seen the new or are you familiar with DJI at all? Like have you heard of DJI?
I've heard of it.
Okay. So cuz DJI is like they're like the drone company in the drone space. Like they have I think like 70% of the market share. So pretty much if there's like a camera drone, which is the kind of drone that you're talking about, like that has a camera for filming, that type of thing, that's going to be like a DJI drone. And they just released a what they call the FPV. I think they're calling it the DJI FPV. And so it's kind of like a cross between a camera drone and a racing drone. And I was just curious if you'd heard of that because DJI is kind of it's sort of special because it's kind of it's sort of like the first more mainstream use of FPV, I guess, aside from FPV racing on ESPN.
I to be honest, I haven't heard of it. I remember my last neighbor having a white, like straight out of the box drone that you could mount a camera to the bottom of it. Is that?
Yeah, that would
like
be
that.
Yeah, that would be like like an earlier version of the DJI. I mean, probably DJI, but because the thing is, like, because they're so popular, there's so many other companies that like just copy the look of it and like they make it look like it. And there's a lot of not necessarily false advertising, but like exaggerated advertising
sure
in the drone space. So okay, yeah, because I was just curious like what somebody who is not familiar with drones or FPV drones or sort of like I guess you could say like sort of the modern RC hobby, kind of what you would think of when you hear about drones, because it's interesting because the like if somebody said what's a drone, I'd say like, well, it depends on who you ask, because to some people might give the answer like you gave, and it's like very much more utilitarian or like surveillance or like very organized like sport type of like racing. But for example, according to the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, a drone, basically any type of RC aircraft would be considered a drone. And what they call a drone is, well, they call it like a small unmanned aircraft, which is like any aircraft that can't doesn't have a human on board to actually manipulate the controls, basically. So anyway, it's interesting to hear from you about that, because like the government calls everything drones, like even your, I don't know about rubber band powered. Yeah, I think maybe, I'm not sure if rubber band powered airplanes would count, but even I
don't know if there's controls per se.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess maybe that's even worse because there are no controls at all. Like, so it's yeah. So like, what? Just curious. What do you think about that in terms of like even a 10-year-old flying a foam airplane, in his yard or her yard, that being called like a drone and being regulated as a drone according to the FAA. What like does that what kind of vibe do you get from that? I'm just curious.
Kind of a ridiculous one. I mean, if you're talking to me, the difference is distance, right? So if you have a drone that can go, let's say 1,000 feet, right, in any direction, as opposed to a toy quadcopter that can only go 50 feet in any direction, are you going to define those two as the same exact thing? Because I feel like there's quite a difference in what you might be able to do, nefariously, if you will. There's a huge difference between those, and there's a huge difference between a foam glider. Like if some 10-year-old, if my kid who's 6 wants a foam glider and throws it in our yard and it goes into the neighbor's yard, it does that, right? Does that break FAA law because you threw something into another yard?
Right.
So I feel like the definitions for drones, and I'm not well versed in this at all.
Yeah.
This is,
well,
again,
that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I'm just some guy in a basement, bro.
Yeah,
But
I know.
from my perspective, the definition should really be based on, number one, can it be controlled outside of one direction, right? And when I say that, I mean like a glider. If I throw it northward, it's probably going to land somewhere northward, right? For the most part, unless I change the flaps and I want it to spin around, right? But I can't actively control the direction mid-flight. I feel like there should be a difference in definition there, number one. And then number two, there probably should be a difference as far as distance is concerned. One of those drones that you were just talking about, what was it, the XPI, or I probably already butchered it, but
the
one we were just
DJI?
talking about. DJI, thank you.
DJI drones. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
If I buy a DJI drone that's worth $5,000, how far do you think that device could go?
Yeah, I mean, they
probably could go
advertise
great distance.
Yeah,
right?
like 10 kilometers.
That's different than you in your backyard with a quadcopter racing around the trees, right?
Yeah, exactly, right. Yeah, and I think that's I don't have a huge point of asking you that, other than just to hear another opinion kind of outside of the sort of the drone space. But
sure.
But yeah, that's kind of the same kind of vibe that I get, and that's one thing that is kind of going on with drones. There's kind of like a lot of hubbub, because really what it comes down to, like you're saying, is like people aren't knowledgeable about the drones and what they are capable of and are not capable of, and unfortunately, it's a lot of the people that are actually making these like rules and stuff. They're the ones that aren't they're not familiar with like what drones are capable of, and then like what the hobby is interested in, as opposed to somebody who's doing more like surveillance type of stuff. So I just bring that up just to get your kind of 2 cents on that.
That was actually, so I try to keep my podcast at an hour just because I don't want to completely bore my guests. But one of the questions that I had that maybe you can put up on your channel was, I know, what was it, 2 years ago maybe? There was a real big law, I believe, that was going into effect for drones. There was a lot of, protesting said law. Could you kind of briefly educate me as to what that was about and your stance on it? Is that essentially what we're talking about, or?
Yeah, well, I was speaking kind of more broadly.
Okay.
I mean, I honestly, I'm not really prepared with any sort of like specifics right now.
That's all right.
But basically, there's the trend. What people were protesting was the NPRM, which is the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, and basically what the proposed rules were, which have now been brought out, and I can't think of the word, but basically they've been like solidified. Basically, the proposed rules would be incredibly restrictive for hobbyist pilots, or really for any unmanned aircraft. And that's like a rapidly changing kind of situation right now. So I don't want to get into like specifics necessarily, but
that's fair.
But basically, it's kind of like you're saying, like it kind of, in a lot of ways, it's like you have to get a driver's license to ride a bicycle. Like that's kind of how it feels. Because like, as you've seen in a lot of my videos, like, I'm just flying small stuff around the backyard. The cameras that I can see through are like trash. The actual video quality is really bad. So you're not surveilling anything. You're just flying around like for the fun of, flying around. But even that would get classified, like that would fall under the rules of a commercial operator, operating for filming purposes or surveillance or like different types of stuff. So so basically the trend is the FAA really putting in a lot of restrictions, and the big one is remote ID. So it would kind of work like how in manned aviation, now all manned aircraft have to have essentially like a beacon that kind of blips out their location to other aircraft. And so that is that's kind of what the FAA wanted to do for all unmanned aircraft. And like I said, the rules are kind of, there's a lot of gray area basically, and some of that is being contested in court. Actually, one of the major not manufacturers but companies in the hobby race day quads, they put together a legal team, and they're going to be actually suing the FAA and challenging the ruling that's coming out. As being, too restrictive, and trying to get a good, middle ground. Skirt. Hey everybody, Adam from the future here. I just want to interject here with a little bit more information about the FAA ruling and stuff. I don't think I gave a very good description here, partly because I wasn't prepared, and also because it really is quite a complicated subject and very confusing, because there's a lot of legalese and stuff. But basically, the biggest concerns is that the remote ID requirements, which is what is being pushed, it brings up problems with potential problems with privacy, because potentially anybody could look up your information of who's flying the aircraft and where you are, and then also it would be very restrictive for any kind of hobbyist, because if you have an aircraft that is over 250 grams, and anybody correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, because this is rapidly changing, but if it's over 250 grams, you would need a remote ID device on there to send out like a beacon with basically your information and everything. And then if you didn't have that, then you could only fly in a FRIA, which is a federally recognized identification area. So kind of like an RC field, but those would be essentially few and far between. So pretty much it would make it illegal for you to just put together a foam airplane and go fly it out on your own property, below the tree line. Basically. So in the description of this video / podcast, I'm going to put a link to Race Day Quads, where they give updates for the legal battle that's going on, as well as the GoFundMe page for that, so you can help support the effort. Okay, back to this podcast. Because the thing is, hobbyists, they just want to, we just want to have a good time, and we don't want to break any laws. We don't, you know what I mean? It's not like we're these rogue people trying to spy on people and do bad things and stuff. We just want to be able to build our, RC quads and drones and stuff, and fly them, and we don't, want to break any laws. And for the most part, a lot of this stuff is common sense. But like I said, it goes back to the education. So the education part on the part of the people who do own drones, their responsibility is to be educated into look, you this is where you can fly, this is where you can't fly. So a little bit of understanding of airspace. The most obvious thing is hey, if you see an airplane every single day fly in this, right over your house, then you probably live right next to an airport, and you probably shouldn't fly, right there. So there's a lot of there's a lot of stuff that could be solved with some education and common sense, and that's kind of the, I guess, the, what'd you call it, the developing legal situation in the drone world.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and it's go ahead.
I was just going to ask you, is there similar legislation for RC cars? Those gas power cars can go 120, 140 miles an hour. They've got quite a distance on them. They have cameras on them.
I don't know.
Right?
I actually don't know. I'm not familiar with RC cars.
Because from my perspective, Adam, if you look at it from that, for again, I hate to do this, but for nefarious purposes, what someone could do with a drone, or however you want to define a drone, but I think you know what I mean. You could do something very similar with an RC car as well. They have pretty great distances. They also can have cameras mounted to them. And quite frankly, I'm pretty sure an RC car could probably carry more weight. Yeah. So if you were distributing something in that manner.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so potentially.
What's the difference?
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how I feel, and I think a lot of other people feel, kind of the same way. I mean, just actually, I was thinking about making some sort of a video, sort of highlighting how kind of ridiculous like some of these like rules are, because for example, well, I think there's a lot of hype is what it is. So it's and I think the reason why RC cars, I don't know what the like regulations are necessarily regarding unmanned ground vehicles, but I think nobody cares about them because they're not new and they're not exciting and scary. And so there's, the media, they don't really care about that. They, drones are the thing. And so the media is like, oh man, there was this drone here and it's probably going to kill you and all your children. And, so unfortunately in a lot of ways, there's a negative perception of drones, or even the word drone. Like you said, you think drone, you think like military surveillance, kind of scary stuff. But yeah, and so and actually surveillance. Just now that I think about it, I was just completing some permits and licensing stuff for like commercial, being a commercial remote pilot, and there's a lot of concern about privacy is the big thing, and that's understandable. Like I totally get it. Like I'm totally on board with like people I think should be able to shoot down drones if they're over their own property. But then at the same time, if I'm flying near someone's property, but like I know that I'm not over their property and I'm not watching them, I don't want them to shoot my drone down. But so I see both sides of it. But in terms of the surveillance part, I do think there is kind of like some overblown concern about that, because one is that Google Earth exists, so that's a thing. And
right.
The other thing is like anybody could, granted it takes a lot more effort, but somebody could like rent a plane or have somebody fly them up and circle someone's house, and they could, take images. Granted, it's not exactly the same thing. But the other thing is like, like a friggin' telescope. Like if you live, I don't live in the city, but say if you lived in, an apartment building and you're 10 floors up, like, and you have a telescope, like imagine what you can see with that. And you don't need a drone. So, but that doesn't seem to be the big, the big headline. But anyway, I'm not really sure what my point is of what I'm talking about now,
right.
But yeah,
what I hear you saying is that it comes down to the same thing for every single topic, right? It's just education. And what I would like to see personally is once the law is figured out, right? And again, I'm not a drone operator. I'm not in this space. I would like to see that when you purchase a drone from somebody, there's a pamphlet in there saying, hey, make sure you check the laws, make sure you do this, make sure you do that as well, because education on the part of a company selling a product, they probably bear some responsibility making sure their consumers are also educated in how to operate the product, to include what space you're supposed to fly in, things of that nature. Because as well as I do, when people rip open a package or they get something new, the first thing they're going to do is not to go on a government website and find out what they're not supposed to do with it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But if you have that pamphlet there, you might be like, oh, okay, cool. I can, I can't fly near an airport, or I can't, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, fill in the blank. Or even if a company had, a website, hey, listen, click on your location on Google Maps and it's just green or red, right? Here's what,
actually, there is a lot of that. There are those websites, and that's definitely helpful for anyone who wants to fly in places and be knowledgeable about that stuff. The DJI drones, like I was talking about, those, so they do have that. They're actually pretty good about that. Like in terms of like, I guess, informing people. They're almost too good about it in like a Big Brother type of sense, where it's like you buy their drone, but they could pretty much disable it from flying at any point. So that's kind of a different issue, but they are good. One of the things that they are good about is, since you connect it to your phone, they will overlay information of like no-fly zones and like different areas, and so there's a lot of autonomy. It's good and bad, because the autonomy can be good sometimes, because if you have somebody who has no idea what they're doing, maybe it could keep them from doing something stupid. On the other hand, if people expect that the autonomy is going to keep them from doing something stupid, then they don't put any effort into, having responsibility to educate themselves about airspace and about, where to fly and where not to fly and things like that. But so that's kind of another can of worms right there, at least in the drone space. But yeah, and that's all like the not fun stuff, unfortunately. Like that's like, honestly, if ignorance is bliss, and if you just, and this is why it's kind of ridiculous, is like, if you were just like, hey, I want to buy some motors and electronics, I got some foam board, I'm going to build an airplane. And then you go down to like a local soccer field or something, and you fly your airplane or drone. I shouldn't just say airplane, because drone too, because drones are scary, but so people usually try to keep them separate from airplanes. But so let's say you build a drone as well, and you're just flying around like the soccer field, and you have no idea about airspace or anything, but you don't fly up like super high. No one would probably ever care or know. Like, if you're just using common sense and you're being courteous to people, and like, you could be flying, right next to a super busy airport. And if I'm not advocating that anybody do this, but my point is, in some ways, there's a lot of hubbub about very little, or much ado about nothing, I should say.
I think what's interesting to me in this space, Adam, is that, I look behind you, you have 2 3D printers. Mm-hmm. You could put in all the regulation, all the restrictions you want, but that's not going to stop somebody from building a drone that could be completely unregistered and undetectable and untraceable and do something nefarious with it, right?
That's absolutely true. Yeah.
Years ago, I think it was 2012, when we had, unfortunately, we had Sandy Hook, and there was a huge talk about guns and gun control. And we're still having that conversation today.
Yeah.
But back then, there was a guy out of Austin who had a company called Defense Distributed, and he was selling lower receivers, because it was just a block of metal, and you could get the CNC machine for like $1,000, and you could make as many lower receivers as you wanted. They could be completely unregistered, untraceable. So to me, what's interesting is I want to see more of what the regulation ends up being in the maker space, because we're getting closer and closer to a point where, you can make things in your own house and have, again, nefarious purposes, and nobody would ever know until you went out and carried whatever that purpose was. So at what point do makers, people who do 3D printing, and especially with how it's advancing at this point, I think people are doing like metal 3D printing now, and CNC machines are even more accessible. Think about all the parts and things that you can make at any given moment. What are you going to do about that? Is the government just going to go in and rip off plans off of different maker websites so that you can't print this or you can't make that?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, there's like 50 guys that can recreate that in 5 seconds.
Right, and a lot of times the stuff that gets regulated is more sophisticated stuff anyway, whether it's firearms or technology, and there's usually a cheaper, simpler way of doing it, but it just might take more effort, or might not be as nice. But yeah, I think there is a lot of similarity there, and at the end of the day, whatever it is, you can't regulate, or you can't what's the word I'm thinking of? You can't legislate away crime, or like you said, people's nefarious intent. So you can't do it. Like you can't and that's the big thing. Like that's like I think personally my beef with the increasing regulation in the unmanned aircraft space. Like I'm totally on board with, like, yes, we need people need to be educated. Aircraft need to, stay separated. Everybody needs to stay safe. All good. But the issue is that it's like the FAA claims that it's about safety, like drone safety and all this stuff with safety. I don't actually have the specific. I don't have the specific number or the facts pulled up right now, but basically there have been very few instances of drone related accidents with manned aircraft, and I believe that there have been like I want to say 0 deaths. I could be wrong, but an incredibly low amount of mishaps with drones and manned aircraft. And again, I don't actually have the numbers pulled up right now, but basically every day there's like a lot of fatalities that occur from general aviation, manned aircraft, and commercial aviation. So it's like, are drones really the biggest risk? Like, there's a lot of potential, but if you can't legislate just based on potential, because potentially anybody could do anything. You know what I mean?
Sometimes it feels like we're heading in the direction of trying to prevent crime before it happens by nerfing the entire world, right? Yeah. And the fact of the matter is that no matter how many idiot stickers you put out there, someone's still going to be an idiot.
Right.
So, again, like you said, right, I'm not advocating for people to do silly things, but you can't prevent every single dumb thing from ever happening, because what you're doing then is you're taking away people's ability to create, to have fun, to enjoy whatever it is that they're doing. So it's a fine line for sure.
Yeah. And I would just say basically, just like any kind of issue, especially the current events issues that are going on, to me personally, it all comes down to personal responsibility. And if you don't have, personal responsibility, then you can't really count on anybody trying to. You can't count on no one doing. Sorry, what am I saying here? If people don't have personal responsibility, then you can't really stop them from doing stupid stuff, because they're not going to take the responsibility, or they won't believe that they have responsibility to not do stupid stuff. So it's kind of like, well, if it's just because everything is allowed doesn't mean that you should do it, and just because everything that isn't allowed and everything that isn't allowed doesn't make it inherently dangerous, let's say.
Right. So there's a risk in doing everything, and I always err personally on the side of caution. I appreciate the fact that you talk about personal responsibility, because in any space, no matter what the conversation is, I feel like that should be the first thing that's said. Hey, what are you right? What are you doing to make sure that you're safe, or that you're doing the right thing? It's got to start there. But I can understand the fear mongering. I mean, we spent, again, I was in the military for a little bit. We spent a lot of time using drones to act in war, quite literally. So like you said, using the term drone can bring up different images of what people think of it, and what people that's why they end up being scared of it. So at the end of the day, unfortunately, what you have ahead of you is a PR campaign that has to be run, whether it's you or every other YouTuber or every company that does, RC drones or is in that space. So you guys unfortunately have to work to educate people on what a drone really is, what the capabilities really are, and the reasons why people enjoy doing this hobby and enjoy flying and enjoy doing what they do. Unfortunately, that's your tasking, and although I'm in your corner and I'm rooting for you, that's a space that you and everyone who's a part of that community unfortunately has to find a way to be able to send that message out to everybody else, so that people aren't scared. So they're like, yeah, no, the FAA is right. Screw all drones. Like, you guys can't do that anymore. That's the fight that you have ahead of you.
Yeah. Yeah, and and that's why I'm so glad to have been able to be on your podcast, because that is another one of the big things that I try to do with my channel is to educate people about the benefits of RC stuff and drones, and how really there's not a lot of difference between a foam RC airplane and a multi-rotor quadcopter thing with a camera strapped to it. It's really more about how you use it and what your intent is.
Yeah, absolutely. But like I said, here comes you're gonna have to do the campaign. You're gonna have to keep fighting the good fight and making the videos that you make and continue to educate people, especially people who are beginners, because that's gonna be where you get the source of that push, right?
Yeah,
because you already
exactly.
have the people who do what you do every day. They're already there. They exist.
Mhm.
They're not going anywhere. What you need is more people in your corner, and you only get that by introducing them to your hobby, which is something
Right.
you do an excellent job at. So
Well, thank
keep
you.
it up, brother.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. And that's going to do it for this podcast. Thanks for listening. If you actually listened to that whole thing, that is pretty darn amazing. Be sure to go check out Caleb vs. Self podcast if you want to enjoy some more fascinating discussions with a variety of people. Thanks for listening and watching, everybody, and I will see you again very soon.